I definitely used to say that my business was my life. It was my baby. I was obsessed with it. I don't know what I'd do without it. And whilst some of those phrases, I'm sure, still come out of my mouth to this day, I feel like over the last few years, I've been on a real journey of becoming more detached from my business and creating what I've started to see as quite a healthy separation between me and my business. And I thought in this episode, it might be interesting for me to unpack a bit more about kind of why I've done that, the benefits that it's had, what that's looked like, and also in hindsight, what I think has led to that kind of healthy detachment happening. Because I definitely know that my past self was incredibly aware that I was unhealthily attached, but had no clue what it looked like to change that. I remember people would say to me, like, you just need to like care a bit less, be a bit less attached, like just separate yourself from the business, like don't take as much identity from your work. And I just laugh and be like, okay, how cool, that sounds good in theory, but like what do I do to make that happen? So I figured now, with some of that hindsight, maybe I could share some things that could be valuable for you. And it's also just a conversation that I think is really interesting and important for us to have, of like, what does it look like as business owners to create that sense of healthy separation? Now, I want to clarify, when I say detached, I'm talking like 20% better than I used to be. Like, I am still, of course, very attached to my business. I mean, I have to be, right? Like, because I quite physically and legally and financially and literally am. Hi, my name's Alice Benham. I run a business called Alice Benham Limited. I don't know how detached you can become when it's literally your full name. I work in my business every single day. I care so much. Like, so many things haven't changed, but what I would say this journey has been is just getting that little bit of separation between the two. Almost it felt like before, you know, if you think of one circle as Alice Benham, like me as a person, and one circle is like Alice Benham Limited, like me as a business. It wasn't even a Venn diagram in that they were overlapped. It was like one circle. Like, there was no separation between the two. The business and I were one and the same. If something was going wrong in the business, I felt it personally. It was all very connected. Whereas now they are absolutely still very connected and attached, but they overlap as opposed to are the exact same circle. Like, I think of like one circle of like me as an individual, and the business that I run, you know, is overlapped with that. It's a really big part of who I am, and I'm so proud of my business. And I'd be lying if I said, you know, I wouldn't care if the business shut down tomorrow. Like, I'd be very sad. It's a very big part of my life. But past me definitely used to think like, I do not know what I would do if this business stopped, because I genuinely just had no sense of identity or separation outside of the business. So a bit of a, I guess, disclaimer there. Like, I am not coming from a place of like, I'm at the other end of the spectrum and I'm now just completely detached from it all. Because also I think to an extent, to run a business, you've got to be quite attached. Like, otherwise what drives us, right? Like, you've got to be a bit obsessed. You've got to be pretty all in. You've got to be quite kind of dedicated to it. But I guess what I've learned over the years is to create a bit of a healthier separation in terms of my identity and how connected I feel to the business despite that. And as I reflect on it, that journey, although it's felt very non-linear and, you know, not actually that intentional, looking back and seeing that detachment start to take place has had such a positive impact. You know, just recently I've been going through some really big challenges. I shared it in last week's episode. I've had a big thing go wrong behind the scenes in terms of my finances and my admin, and everything's going to be fine, but it's been stressful. It's been arguably one of the worst things that's happened to me as a business owner. And I've been reminded again the benefit of being that little bit detached from the business. Where my past self was so consumed by every challenge, you know, there was a low and I would feel that so deeply as an individual. I wouldn't switch off from it. I think about it all the time. This recent challenge has actually been a really good example to me of like what that healthy detachment has allowed me to do, in the sense that this challenge has obviously still been challenging and I've still felt feelings about it, but it hasn't taken over my life. Like, it hasn't wrecked me. It hasn't floored me. It hasn't felt like, you know, the biggest thing going on in my world right now. It's the biggest thing going on in my business right now. But actually, I don't feel that kind of affected by it. And I know that when I used to face challenges, that definitely wasn't the case. I mean, I can probably think back to what inspired me to start trying to create a bit of separation between myself and the business was that back when I got trolled online and, you know, various things happened around that, I was so affected. Like, I could think of nothing else. I could do nothing else. It felt like my whole life was over because this thing was happening in the business, and it obviously felt so personal. And like I said, I still feel affected by things that go on in the business. It still affects me. I still have an emotional connection, but like there's a little bit more of a gap now. And it was so interesting actually when the finance thing went wrong recently to almost be able to like see myself being better, like see like I guess a really clear example of like, oh wow, that's real like personal growth that like absolutely I'm still feeling affected by this, but like not nearly in the way that I used to be when things would go wrong. And it's definitely been over the last kind of 4 years, I see every challenge, I've just got a little bit better at dealing with it because I've been less emotionally involved. And if anything, being less emotionally involved in the challenge allows me to be better at fixing the problem and focusing on action. So I'd say that's one of the biggest benefits of creating that healthy separation. I think just in general then, as a result of that, I'm much more level. You know, the way I used to feel in the business was basically like, if the business was going well, I felt good. If the business felt like it was going badly, I felt bad. It was very volatile, very much like an emotional roller coaster. And don't get me wrong, I'm still affected emotionally by how the business is doing. Like I care and it matters to me, but it's not quite as tightly connected in the sense that almost now I feel much more neutral. Like when something goes really good, I'm happy about that, but I wouldn't say it kind of thrills me in the way that maybe it used to. And that might seem like a bad thing, but it also benefits me in the other way, whereas something now isn't quite going right, it doesn't feel quite as negative for me in terms of how it impacts me. And I think therefore just as a person, I feel much more relaxed and centered and less kind of, you know, constantly all over the place emotionally. And although that might sound like I kind of now care less about how the business is performing, I think that's made me a much better business owner because I'm able to be a lot more logical and clear-headed. Like emotion is of course relevant and it's important and we're not ignoring it, but like a lot of the time in business, emotion is not that helpful. Like when we need to make clear decisions, when we need to move forwards with action, you know, I often say the phrase to myself, like action over emotion. Or I've seen the phrase before that's like follow the plan, not the feeling, right? When there's a bit less emotion, when there's a bit less feeling, it's easier to follow the plan. It's easier to take the action. It's easier to show up. It's easier to make decisions. And so arguably now, being less attached to the business, I'm actually a better business owner because I think I'm more level-headed, I'm clearer, I'm much better at making those kind of decisions because I feel less attached to it emotionally. It also almost helps me to think of the business more objectively. You know, the recent decisions I've made of like, you know, stopping guest episodes on this podcast or saying no to some projects and thinking about retiring different products and offers. Previously, I would have felt really emotional about that because I would feel like that's me, that's my identity that I'm getting rid of. Whereas actually now I'm more detached from the business, I can make those kind of decisions much more confidently and easily because I'm like, well, it's just the business. Like, you know, I care about the business, but the business isn't me and I'm not the business. And that's just more of an objective view that I have now where I feel much more neutral about those things. The final benefit that I touch on as well, I guess, is just more of a personal one of like, I feel more like a whole person. You know, what inspired me to become more detached from the business, as I said, was feeling like there was no difference between the two and feeling like Alice Benham Limited was me. And actually now, knowing who I am when I'm not being a business owner is so fun. You know, it's fun because it means there's lots of things now in my life that I enjoy that aren't working, and it's great to have more things that you enjoy. And also just means I think on a day-to-day basis there's more balance and there's more kind of joy in my world because it's not all having to come from this one place. I remember before having this fear of like, if the business stops, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm going to want to do. And actually now, if the business stopped, I would be very sad. I probably would still be heartbroken and I would definitely grieve a big part of my identity, but I wouldn't feel completely lost. I would still have many things that are important to me and that I enjoy. So many benefits, I guess is what I'm trying to say, of creating this sense of healthy detachment. And when I think about maybe some of the things that have helped get me from, you know, where I was 4 or 5 years ago to where I feel like I am now, and I'm sure this is a journey I'm still continuing to go on and will continue to, you know, make positive change in. A few of the things that I wanted to share with you would be, first of all, and this is such an annoying one to share, and I know my past self would have scoffed at this, such a big thing here has been time and continued experience. I think my past self logically knew that I needed to become less attached to the business, but I noticed that I didn't start creating change in that area until I genuinely felt that it was something that I needed to do. I remember I used to be very aware, like, yeah, me and the business are really attached, and I almost saw it as a good thing. Or even if I was talking about it from a place of like, that's not very good, I didn't necessarily like care to do anything about it. You know, it's the difference between having a problem and wanting to solve that problem. I knew I had a problem for a long time. I knew that, okay, this probably isn't that good, how attached I am to this, but I guess I hadn't experienced enough negative situations to show me that I needed to change that. And time, seeing more experiences where, like, you know, it felt really volatile. I didn't enjoy being that attached to the business. It maybe was even making me a worse decision maker and business owner. That helped me to be sure that I needed to make changes. And I guess it motivated me to make the changes that I have begun to make. There is such a big difference between knowing you have a problem and actively solving it. And I think time and continued experiences that kind of motivated me really helped to move me from that state to a state of actually creating some change. The next thing that I would share that I think has really helped over the years, and this might sound quite negative or even like, oh, why would I want to do that? But I think the two are so connected, is that I have actually, quite subconsciously really, but I've definitely done it, become less obsessed with my wins and the positive stuff. And as a result, that has helped me to be less impacted by the failures and the challenges. I think the two are so connected, right? If you let yourself feel really boosted and emotionally affected by the positive, that naturally is then going to happen with the negative. And that created for me that roller coaster feeling of like, the business is good, I'm good, business is bad, I'm bad. These days, the wins, you know, publishing my book or getting an award or hitting a certain target, they don't necessarily touch the sides the way that they used to. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Number one, because those aren't the things that actually matter most to me. Those things are not my definition of success. They're not why I run this business. And secondly, because I think it helps me to stay much more neutral. If I'm always, you know, I'm good when the business is good, that's good when the business is good, but the business isn't always good. Right? Business is tough. And so in a way, finding neutrality where like when something good happens, I celebrate it and I feel that, but I'm not necessarily needing that to feel good. I think that has been so helpful for me. And that was not an overnight thing. I didn't just decide like, oh, I'm going to stop being so bothered by the highs. But I think I just noticed over time, I would maybe focus more on celebrating for myself the wins that were most important to me. And for me, that's things like, you know, how am I feeling in terms of my fulfillment? How much am I enjoying my work? How much am I paying myself? You know, not how much revenue are we making, but what am I making? What am I investing in that feels important to me? How's my health? How's my work-life balance? How much time have I taken off? Like that's the stuff that tells me that I'm doing well. And if anything, those more shiny external things are really cool and I love them and they're so fun to acknowledge, but I'm not necessarily, I guess, deeping them and making them affect my identity or how I feel about myself in the way that I maybe used to before. And the benefit of that as well is then when things go wrong, I don't feel as affected by that emotionally too. So I'd say that is a big thing that's really helped. The third thing that I want to share, which I would argue is really the catalyst to me making this change about 5 years ago, was spending more time not working. I know this sounds so obvious, and my past self was probably like, duh, that's gonna help. But like genuinely, when I took my first ever month off back in 2020, I see a direct correlation between that moment and me beginning this journey of creating that healthy detachment. I actually decided to take my first month off in 2020 because I realized that I didn't know what I liked doing that wasn't working. And I then wanted to challenge myself to have a whole month not working to try and figure out what some of those things were. I knew logically this is not good. Like I need to know some things that I like to do that aren't working. Did I at the time care that much about that? No, but I kind of knew I needed to make some change. And so that first month off was so helpful because I actually connected to me as a person, like me not as a business owner, me not as a strategist, me not as a, you know, whatever it is that you might see me as. And that was so challenging and stretchy and uncomfortable, but helpful. And that is one of the reasons now that my month off every year is a non-negotiable. In fact, this is the final podcast episode before I leave for summer. And I'm very excited because for the last 5 years, having August off has helped me to stay connected to and continue building up a sense of my personal identity. A whole month where I get no identity from being a business owner, from being a strategist, from my clients, you know, feedback. And that's actually good for me. It's good to be a bit, you know, cut off from that because it reminds me, okay, who are you outside of this? Where do you find your worth that isn't in running a business? It's sometimes still uncomfortable. I find myself wanting to do lots of house projects or do lots of to-do lists or do lots of jobs because then I'm like, well, I must stay busy because that's my identity. But it's a good challenge to be like, what's your identity when you're not being productive? What's your identity when you're just being you? And I'm not saying that I've learned that, but that's definitely a journey that I've been on, and spending time not working, having time off, giving myself space to work out what my personal hobbies, habits, you know, enjoyments are has been so good. And obviously that then helps me to not just do those things in August, but do them all the time. I know it probably sounds silly, but it's not to me. Like having the hobby of like going to Pilates is really important to me because that's a big part of who I am. When I'm not a business owner, I really love Pilates, or I really love cycling, or I really love interior design. Like finding those things has been a journey, but a really good one because it helps me to know that, okay, being a business owner is a big part of my identity, but it's not everything. I would have other things to connect to if that were to go away or to change shape slightly. And the final thing I want to share on this topic that I think helps me to create this healthy detachment, one I touched on a little bit already, but is reminding myself what success means for me and measuring those things. When I had that really volatile relationship with the business, when the highs made me high and the lows made me low, high in a figurative sense, by the way, it was because I was so obsessed with like the really shiny external stuff. Like a big launch, I felt good. A bad launch, I felt bad. And like, I'm still a human. I still feel good when I have a good launch. I still feel a bit bad when I have a bad launch. However, back then I used to think that was my identity. Like, I'm a good business owner if, I'm a good person if, I'm a good, Alice Benham if. Whereas actually now I know that my why, my definition of success is not really any of those shiny external things. It's things like the lifestyle I have, how healthy I am, the money that I'm paying myself, what that money allows me to do, what I do with that money, the workload that I have, the kind of things that I'm doing, the impact that I'm having. Those measures do tell me if I'm successful or not as a business owner and as a human. And I measure them, A, because they're the things that are actually important to me, and B, because they're the things that I'm actually in control of. Can you imagine if I measured my success based on cash flow and money in the bank, and then what's just happened to me would happen to me, where all of my cash flow gets cut and there's barely any money in the bank? That'd have been a bad time for me emotionally. Thankfully, my measure of success is what I pay myself at the end of the month. And I can keep that going despite cash flow and lots of other financial things going wrong. There's just a specific example there, but you can just see the difference where I think, right, what actually matters to me? And I'll find my identity in that. We got to find identity somewhere, right? Like, I don't think it's normal or healthy or even doable to be completely detached from our businesses. So I guess what I've learned to do is to find that identity where it's actually relevant. I do care about what people think of me, but I've learned that I care what my clients think of me. I don't care what strangers of the internet think of me. I do care financially how my business is going, but what I really care about is the reserves I have, the money I'm paying myself, not how many tens of thousands my last launch did or didn't make. I do care about my output and my impact, but I don't care about, if every single task on the to-do list is completed, because it never is. I'm still finding that sense of identity and meaning in the business, but I look at the results that really matters to me, and I really focus on what success means for me and measuring myself in those areas. So to recap, detaching myself from the business has been a long, non-linear journey that I'm probably never going to finish, but has been amazing. It helps me weather the challenges better. It makes me a better business owner. It makes me a happier person. And I think the 4 things that have really helped me to do that are time, and really seeing the negatives of being overly attached. Secondly, not attaching my happiness to my wins and external successes, and therefore not feeling so low about the negative stuff too. Thirdly, spending time not working, giving myself space to do things that aren't run a business, and taking a month off being a big part of that. And then finally, number 4 is reminding myself what success means for me and measuring those metrics rather than just the shiny things that often I can't actually control as well. I really hope that you have found this episode valuable. It's a topic that, like I said, I think is relevant to all of us as business owners, and maybe you resonate with different parts of my journey. Maybe you're more where I've been, where you realize there's a problem but you want to make change, or maybe you're ahead of me and you can share more insights and encouragements for me on how to keep this kind of healthy detachment moving forwards. Either way, I would love to hear from you. Feel free to share in the comment section if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening, then hit the link in the description to join me over on YouTube and say hi. As I mentioned, this is my final episode before being off for a month, so I am saying goodbye. I'm going to be spending the whole of August not working. I'm going away on a couple of nice trips, and more than anything, I'm just going to give myself lots of space to just rest and explore and potter and be bored and do lots of the fun things that I don't always have the space for in the day-to-day of running a business. So I will be back in September. We've got an episode coming out on the 2nd of September, so straight back to it. Make sure that you are following or subscribing wherever you're tuning into this episode so that you don't miss out on that, and I will catch you in September. I hope you have a good summer, whatever your August looks like, and speak to you soon. Bye.